I'm Janine. This is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. Standing by to join me are Liza Rodman and Jennifer Jordan. We're going to talk about their book, The Babysitter, My Summers with a Serial Killer. And I have to say, ladies, I'm kind of a wimp, and I almost didn't book this because I thought, is this going to scare me? But wow, when I read about this, what made you decide to make this happen?
Oh gosh, that's such a big question. Well, it kind of took a hold of me a long time ago and wouldn't let me go.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I spent several years, 13, 15 years, researching and banging my head against the wall and putting in the drawer and taking it out. And Jennifer finally had enough of me and said, how about we collaborate? So it's been a long time coming. But it was based on a series of dreams, and I just couldn't let it go. I went down the rabbit hole and never came out.
That's what happens. Now,
Mhm.
Liza, this was your babysitter?
Correct.
I was talking to your PR rep, and I was saying I had a bad experience with a babysitter, and it was not this creepy, but kind of creepy. And sometimes we have to process those things.
We do. We definitely do. And he wasn't the creepiest. That's the irony. I mean, there's so many ironies here. He really was a lot of fun. He was like an older cousin or
Wow.
that older brother who you want to be and wear his jeans and listen to his music.
Yeah.
That's who Tony was to us. So we had far worse babysitters. So that's kind of strange.
Right. And the irony was that she was more afraid of her mother
than absolutely.
Of Tony, the serial killer. So as she said, this book has a lot of moments of just like, what is going on here? And who are these people?
That's crazy. So you weren't close with your mom growing up?
I was not, no.
Yeah, I wasn't either, but I could never have imagined being left with a male babysitter.
Well, he was sort of, so it was, at one point, the title for this book in my head was The Accidental Babysitter, because that's really what it was. It was a summertime at a big motel that had been built by my aunt and uncle, who weren't really my aunt and uncle, but my mom's best friend, but that's what we called them. Mm-hmm. And so it was it was 1966. Anything went, as my mother's favorite expression, let it all hang out. Yeah. And so we were sort of free to come and go as we pleased. And it was, my aunt tells this great story. I think it explains it. She would stand at the front desk and he would be coming up the driveway to work. And she would yell out to us, "Here comes Tony." And off we'd go in our flip-flops and our, waving our towels, begging to get in that truck. Can we please, can we go?
Wow.
So he was more, I'm sure he wasn't as thrilled about it as we were. Mm-hmm. I think we can be certain of that.
Give us the setting too. What town?
The setting was Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is at the very, very tip of Cape Cod, and is world renowned for its light and its sand dunes and its gentle breeze and its, lap, 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 as Jen would say, against the shore. Really just this beautiful place at the end of the Cape. The way I remember it, even now as I'm talking, is sort of the blue sky, sand under your feet. Very, busy tourist, but nothing like we'd experienced today. I mean, it was a pretty sleepy place.
And also known for its artists and its bohemians and its drugs and its sex and rock and roll. And as Liza said, let it all hang out. So Norman Mailer called P-Town in the 60s, the Wild West of the East Coast. And it totally was. Yeah. So you had the New York and Boston stuffy crowds coming to P-Town for the summer and just going wild. Mm-hmm. So this was
and it was a safe place for the gay culture to sort of emerge and people to feel safe.
That's great.
Yeah,
one of the few safe places, because it was still illegal in this country to be outwardly homosexual. So, it was a place for the wastrels and the strugglers and those that have been thrown out of their families to come and be accepted and embraced. And Liza tells a great story of her mother being one of them. finding a community in
Right.
Town.
Right.
Amazing. Now, when Jennifer, when Liza told you about this, were you hesitant, or were you just totally on board with this story?
Well, way before I got on board, I heard the story, and I'd already written a few books, and I was like, Liza, oh my God, this is an incredible story. Not only a story, but a book, and not only a book, but a bestseller. So come on, get to it. I know you want to write, get to it. And so on my frequent visits home to Boston, I'd since moved out west, I would, we'd sit up on the couch and curl our toes up underneath us and sip our wine. I'd be like, okay, how are you coming on The Babysitter? Because I immediately saw the book cover when she told me the story. And finally she was like, la, 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 I don't want to talk about it. It's in a drawer somewhere. I can't deal with it. I don't know how to even approach the structure. It's just too much. Don't know. Sure. And because I'd already worked with a similar structure on another ghost book that I'd written, I was like, well, I know how to help you with this. So after, a couple of years of her like, don't ask me anymore, it's just bothersome. Now you're beginning to bug me. I said, okay, let me see if I can help and we can work on this together.
And where are you both right now?
I'm in Boston.
You're Boston, Liza. And where are you, Jennifer?
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. Okay. So you did this from a distance?
We did.
Together?
Well, both. Liza came out here for a month, and then I went back east for a month. And we rented a house in Truro from a dear friend of ours. And so that we could go into the woods, and so that we could walk Commercial Street once again and go into some of the hangouts that are still there from the 60s. And so, including the rooming house where Tony's last two victims and Tony stayed in January of 69. So yeah, so we worked a lot, most of it remotely, but a chunk of it together.
Amazing. So give us a sense, without giving too much away, about how the story unfolds in the book.
The story wasn't that how was the story going to unfold with the book? I think that's why we needed two writers. So what we did was, in the book, we lived parallel lives. So we ran along Tony's years and what he was doing from 1966 to 1969. And then we ran alternating chapters of what I was doing on my summers from 1966 to 1969. So it starts out when I meet him, and he's hired at the Royal Coachman, as was his mother, and that's how I met them. And my mother was also a chambermaid at the Royal Coachman, which was the motel I talked about earlier.
Was she friends? Excuse me. Was she friends with her mother? With his mother?
She employed her, and they were utterly different. My mother was 30. His mother was 50. And in those days, that's quite an age gap.
Yes, it is.
So friends, probably not friends, but knew one another. And Cecilia, who was Tony's mother, used to take us home with her. So we'd go home and stay overnight there. So she was a bit of a babysitter too. And in fact, my mother was known as the babysitter finder. So amongst her friends, and they'd all laugh about it, that if, you hold a mirror under their nose and they're actually breathing, then they're good to babysit.
Oh, great.
So
great criteria. Yeah. Do they have a pulse? Great.
Maybe even sometimes if they don't, speaking of pulses, but anyway, so we met them all. Everyone was working there at the Royal Coachman. And then my mother went on to own the motel across the street. And so we were a little bit removed from it, but still looking to participate in all the fun stuff that was going on across the street, because they had the shuffleboard and they had so it's really just my childhood experiences summer-wise and what was going on with Tony and the overlap. And that's how we told the story.
But let me, because Liza usually tells this story, but I'm going to tell it this time, because the book really started when Liza was having these nightmares and being chased by a faceless attacker. And she would always wake up at the point of that adrenaline surge that wakes you up because your legs hurt, but never know who it was that was chasing her. And then one night, she was working on her thesis at college, so kind of dredging up memories for her journal writing. And one of those nights, one of those nightmares, she saw a face she hadn't seen for 30 years, and it was Tony Costa.
Whoa.
So she went to her mother and she said, why am I dreaming about Tony Costa? I haven't thought about him in 30 something years. And her mother said, well, you know, I remember he turned out to be a serial killer. And Liza's like, what do you mean a serial killer? I mean, we went around with him. We were in the truck. We went to the dump with him. We went out to the woods. And her mother famously said, yeah, so what? He didn't kill you, did he? And that's
Did you meet her mother?
Oh, I did.
Oh God, yes.
Because we met in college. So I would frequently, because my home was up in Vermont and her home was in Boston, a lot closer to college than my home. So we would go home a lot. And her mother,
Tell the story.
Her mother famously, when she took one look at me in my, kind of hippie 70s outfit, said, don't let her sit on the couch. She doesn't look clean.
About you?
About me. Yeah. And in a voice that she knew I could hear. I mean, it wasn't like she took Liza into the next room and ran the water and said,
no. No.
Don't let her sit on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
God. And I didn't, believe me. I didn't get close to that couch.
That's all right. I lied all over it for you.
Yeah. So that's actually the beginning of the book. The prologue of the book is that incredible story of Liza's, seeing Tony in her dreams for the first time, Tony with a gun to her head in the dream, saying to her mother, what the hell went on with Tony Costa?
Yeah.
Right. And
well, he didn't kill you, so who really cares what happened to him?
But your mom had no remorse about, I'm so sorry, I left you with the serial killer.
You know what? My aunt had some remorse, okay. and there were apologies that were sort of almost embarrassed apologies at times in my life. But my mother, no. Well, my mother had no empathy. She wasn't really an empathetic.
She was missing that chip.
Yes.
Yeah, she was more the person who said, well, look, I mean, he didn't kill you, did he? Let's move on.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it wasn't as if, and this is true, it wasn't as if they said, here's a serial killer, and so we're going to have him babysit. And so in my mother's mind, I think she was innocent.
Yeah. And Betty also did not have an ounce of retrospection.
No.
She did not look back at all.
And she was open about it.
Right.
She was open about it. She had no interest.
I'm just curious, what did she do for a living?
She was, in the early years, she was a home economics teacher in high school. And then she got married again, and she didn't do anything. I mean, it's not that she didn't do anything. She tried to raise a blended family and get us all through school. And then she and my father took off to Hawaii. I mean, who knows? Yeah. They weren't, we were a bit in their way, let's say.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it. That's another conversation.
Yeah. It really is. It really
another
is.
Book.
You and your sociopathic mother, yes.
Yeah. Amazing. So what else would you like people to know about this book without giving too much away?
Well, one of the things I hope comes out of this is that these kinds of people and these kinds of personalities, both the Tony Costa personality and my mother's personality, there's a lot of shame. There was a lot of shame there for me in particular, because the kind of mental illness was not, it didn't look like, we didn't know what it was. We didn't name it as such. And people can screen for personalities like this now.
Are you talking about your mom?
I'm talking about my mom and Tony.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that lack of empathy personality.
Sure.
That can be, is Jim Fallon still at UC Irvine? Jenny?
Oh, I'd have to check.
There was a neuroscientist, a guy at UC Irvine, who did a lot of work on the brains of these people and their lack of empathy, sociopaths, psychopaths, because not all of them murder, obviously. My mother, although she lacked empathy, she didn't, kill anyone. So there's a lot to be discussed, I think, about how to prevent this in society, because we know how now.
Sure.
We have the science, and the way we stigmatize people with mental illness is tragic in so many cases.
Oh, yes.
And I think we need to talk about it as a society. So if this book at all elevates that conversation, it will have been a success.
That had to have been so hard for you, which would explain the nightmares. At least I'm the kind of person that will have nightmares when I haven't processed something or something is nagging at me. To not have a parent that you can turn to talk to about this.
Right. And not only could I not turn to, well, I tried to turn to her and talk to her, didn't I? And we see what happened. But not only that, what's not in that scene, which also happened that night, was that she blames other people. She used to blame other people. So it was always, oh, well, that was Joan's fault. She liked to hire anybody she could see. But the fact is that they were in it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was difficult. I made my family from my friends, hence this 45-year friendship and this book.
And I think it's
a lot of it.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that, Janine, and Liza's unprocessed memory is that a lot of people ask us, and ask her, obviously, do you think anything happened to you? Do you think Tony did anything to you? Or do you think you saw something in those trips out to the woods where, by the way, he had buried his victims? And Liza doesn't know. She was too young. But
Wait, excuse me. How old were you, Liza?
7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, so go ahead, Jennifer.
And my answer to that is yes, that she did see something, but that her psyche protected her, and protected her for 30-something years, until between therapy and between the writing process and between kind of dredging stuff up for her journaling in college, these memories had a face to them for the first time. So, my contention is, yes, not that she necessarily suffered at his hands, but that at some point she was terrified of him.
Oh, you were terrified of him.
I don't
subconsciously.
Yes.
I think at some point she was, because that's what the dream finally, she had a series of dreams with faceless attackers. And finally the face was revealed, and it was Tony Costa.
Right.
So in my mind, in my thinking, and my pop psychology, is something imprinted on that young brain that wouldn't let go.
Yeah. Do you feel a little more healed, or do you feel healed as a result of writing this book?
This is my favorite question. It's becoming my favorite question, because the answer is absolutely not. I'm not sure you actually heal from something like this. I think you certainly learn how to deal with it. But I learned to deal with it before I wrote this book. And the process of writing the book is where the catharsis, I think, takes place, because I've always wanted to do it.
Good.
And it took me 15 years to do it. So the idea that the book is out in the world, that Jen and I have made this piece of art that's connecting with people, and that hopefully has some help for people. People reach out a lot and say, I had a mother like that, or I had this experience. So that, having done it, finished it, slogged our way through it, it's not easy material. In fact, it was quite difficult, the material. So that's where I feel accomplished, and as if we've done the right thing.
Yes.
So if there were catharsis, that would be it. But healed, no.
Yeah. I felt that I should have asked the question, do you not have any more nightmares?
Yeah, mostly no.
Okay.
Mostly.
But
those were.
But do you have any faceless nightmares like you did before?
I do not.
Yeah. I think getting it out on paper.
Dr. Jordan's analysis is that once she saw Tony, that her brain, that little 7, 8, 9-year-old was like, phew, finally. Finally, there's some clarity as to, maybe not clarity, but some recognition.
Yes.
Well, something happened.
I think that was part of the research process. Is once I realized what had happened, I went immediately to the research, looking for something. And I was looking for myself. I was looking for was I going to find myself in some of the stories that got told in that trial transcript? And in fact, I did. So that was in trying to understand a very unconventional often violent childhood at the hands of my mom. Somehow the Tony Costa research figured in.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you could have spoken to him later on in life, would you have?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What would you have said?
Well, I would have asked him if he remembered me the way I remembered him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both Jen and I would have asked him, what happened to you?
Yeah. Who did
What
that?
happened? Yeah. Because we know now that it takes some work for these personalities to be triggered into a rage, a murderous rage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that last piece is always trauma.
And not
Some
only
kind
a
of
murderous
trauma.
rage, not only a murderous rage,
Right.
but a post-mortem rage. I mean, after he killed, he went on to then defile and dismember. So the rage was not just in the moment, like, oh my God, what I have done. It was, oh my God, what I have done, but I'm still not done yet.
Right.
I'm still not through. The rage is still, just broiling in me, roiling. So yeah, a lot of damage.
Yeah. And I think that the idea that these personalities are born is inaccurate. And
I think so too.
Yeah, it's inaccurate, and that there's just pure evil in the world. Maybe there is, but it isn't in these personalities. There's a brain abnormality going on here. And so
a combo of nature and nurture.
Right, exactly.
Or a lack of nurture. I wonder what his relationship was like with his mother. Maybe she was abusive.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But they always blame it on the mother. Right. So they're,
But one of the things that we found in the research was that Tony wrote kind of in the third person about one of the murders in graphic detail that only the murderer himself would know. For instance, that one of the bodies had been cut up into 8 pieces, and he described that process, but blamed it on somebody else. Mm-hmm. And in that description of one of his own murders, he says that the man who was committing the murders in his version, his mother walks in, and the mother is, more angry at the victim than she is, at him, him. And I read that as like, holy hell. I mean, you don't just interject a mother into a scene like that unless it happened.
Yeah. And
so for Tony's mother to walk into the scene, to see what he was doing or what he had just done, mm-hmm. and to say, clean this up. Like, not even what happened and, oh my God, 911, clean this up.
Mm.
So.
Does he have any siblings?
Mm-hmm. He has one half brother.
Do you know anything about him?
Not doing great.
Yeah.
Not doing great.
He's still in Truro. And he's, from last we read about him, kind of in a police blogger, he's not doing well. He's not doing great.
I mean, how could you? There's an entire group of people. There's a whole string of victims that weren't actually, that weren't physical victims of this man from this place and this time.
Yeah.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Anything else you'd like people to know before we wrap up?
Jen?
Well, I just, this came to me in one of our recent discussions, is that too often our young voices, and for women, our adult voices, are dismissed. We're gaslit into, oh, just calm down. You're being very emotional. You didn't really see that, did you? Mm-hmm. And so I think that part of what Liza went through was a lifelong process of not having her voice heard. And so therefore not really trusting the nightmares, not trusting the darkness, not trusting the fear of her own mother.
Or the memories.
Right, or the memories. And then all of a sudden to have the affirmation that, oh yeah, by the way, you had a serial killer in your life. And oh yeah, by the way, you went into the woods with him where he had buried his victims. And oh yeah, by the way, your mother was beating you to hell in the meantime. So it just, we have to teach and learn ourselves how to value voices, and regardless of the age. And really, as I said, in particular, women's voices, because I think we do tend to get gaslit more than men do and more than boys do. And so if one of the takeaways that I hope readers get is to really speak up and say, my voice, my memories, my perspective on this matters.
Yes.
And if that happens, then I will feel that, I will have a sense of healing, if you will.
Yeah. I want to add this, because we are in a pandemic, I'm really sensitive to the fact that we're in a mental health pandemic.
Yeah.
And how it's affected everyone. I hear stories of people getting abused, abusing their children, their spouses, their partners. It's crushing. And especially the younger generation who have lost internships and jobs. And I feel like both of you could be talking to victims of abuse about, you don't have to stay silent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a victim of abuse too. So yeah, my mom. Yeah. Emotional, physical.
Yeah.
And it's, it stays with you. It really does.
It does stay with you. And I think, in part of writing this book together.
Yeah.
And Jen would tell you this if we had more time, but it is for a while I had a problem. I was like Patty Hearst with Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
I even had a problem using the word abuse in the manuscript. And we had to get down and dirty and vulnerable to hopefully make that difference. And so I think abuse, people stay, there's all kinds of stuff around it. And that's why I say the shame around it needs to come off.
Yeah.
The cover needs to come off and say, this isn't cool. This isn't cool, people. We need to talk about it.
Sure. Well, and a lot of times people feel guilty for opening their mouths, like,
hello.
Oh, I don't want to throw them under the bus. Who am I, But after a while, as you get older, you think, I need to process this.
That's right. I told my mother I was writing this book, and she cooperated in the beginning. But toward the end, I said, Mom, the book's done, and it was a difficult book to write, and it's going to be difficult for you to read. So I thought we'd read it together.
Whoa.
And she stopped in her tracks and said, why? Why am I not going to like it? And I said, well, Mom, it's about my childhood. Oh, that was about the last word she said about that book. So, her favorite expression was, as long as I look thin and rich, I don't care what you do. But that's turned out not to be the case.
So never apologized for how.
Never. Wow. Although I spent a lot of years doing that.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you wrote the book.
Thank you. I am too.
And I have to say that, I've ghostwritten 2 other books. And when I came to this with Liza, I said, you have to understand that in writing a memoir, you're going to be doing one of the bravest things of your life. And I didn't really, at that point, have any idea what I was inferring. But when I started to get into the weeds with it and reading her voluminous journaling and chapters that she'd written prior to my coming to it, and I was just, like tears in my eyes as a friend of 40 something years going, holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know any of this. She did not share. I only knew from my own experience with Betty, what kind of mother she probably was, but I had no idea.
No idea who your friend was, what she went through.
Right. So for Liza to be able to say, okay, and then actually do it and actually bear some wounds and reveal some warts and ugly, ugly truths was incredibly brave. And
well, you supported this though. You were
did.
There as, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. It wasn't easy for either one of us though. I mean, there were times when it was very difficult to slog through all those emotional reactions going on at the same time. We are here and we did it. And that's why I say that's the cathartic part.
Yes.
Is that we finished it, we made it happen, and we're working it together, and we're still here together.
Yeah.
And that really is the biggest deal of all.
That's great.
And we're both proud of it. We're
yes,
both
we are.
proud of what we both did to make it happen. And but still, I think that Liza deserves an extra kudo just for being able, never mind willing, but able in the final draft, because I've had my two other authors like pull stuff at the very last, two other ghost projects, pull some of the real meat right before publication. I was like, no.
They feel vulnerable.
Right.
You know?
Right. Right.
And it was about their families. It was about their mothers and about their siblings that they pulled the final, the real teeth.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, bravo.
Thank you.
Where can people find out more about you, both of you, and the book?
Almost anywhere they can buy the book, and they can go to my website at lizarodman.com and find events and interviews and the story of our friendship, or at least briefly the story of our friendship, and our blogs. We're both blogging. My
website is jenniferjordan.net, but Liza really has put together a comprehensive website with a book page that has the reviews and the press events and the upcoming events and online book events that we've done at bookstores and book clubs. So all that's available, and it is on lizarodman.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed meeting both of you. Congratulations.
We did too. Thank you so much.
Great.
This has been fun.